Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. Thank you for joining us for today's Knowledge Series webinar, 7 Steps to Capital Campaign Success. I'm Megan Coupland, State Manager for SA and the Southern NT, and I'm joining you this morning from Kaurna country. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live and work, and I pay my respects to elders, both past and present. Today is our 8th and final webinar in our 2021 Knowledge Series. Our presenter this morning is Tammy Zonka. She'll be familiar to those of you who tuned in for her fabulous Major Donor Story Living session in April. Tammy joins us again from Detroit. She's recognized as one of America's top 25 fundraising experts, having trained, coached, and led teams to raise more than $500 million. Tammy consults, she runs masterclasses and workshops, and she leads an online membership community of fundraising transformers. Before I hand over to Tammy, I'll run through a couple of quick Zoom housekeeping points. We'd be very grateful if everyone remains on mute unless speaking. Do keep your cameras on if you're happy to do that. If any technical issues arise for you at any point, please direct message my colleague, Catherine, using the chat box. We will be recording today's session, so a copy will be emailed to you next week, and you'll all have access to the slide deck that Tammy will be running through, so you don't have to write copious notes through the session. And we will have around 15 minutes at the end for discussion. We'd love to hear your questions and have you share your experiences at your organizations. So please type into the chat box as we go, and then we'll raise those at the Q&A at the end. So I think with that, we're all ready to go and get stuck into all things capital campaigns. So Tammy, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining this session. I already see some familiar faces from a few weeks ago, and it's just so good to be here with you. So yes, we're going to talk about 7 steps to capital campaign success. And I'm going to start with this quote from Gerald Panis, who is one of the US legends around running capital campaigns. He's run billion-dollar campaigns for Harvard and just many institutions of higher education, plus all kinds of other missions, including arts organizations. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but he said, donors give to the magic of an idea to save and change lives. And I think that's so important for us to remember, because as fundraisers, we aren't asking donors to give to a building or to a renovation. We're asking them to give to the magic of an idea, right? A vision, something that's inspiring, something that brings them so much joy to contribute to, because they know that they are saving lives and they are changing lives. Now, some of you are maybe familiar with Company B Theater in Surrey Hills. They believed in the magic of an idea and were successfully raised $12.5 million to breathe new life into their much loved community theater. The Art Gallery of New South Wales, while I wasn't personally involved in this campaign, I've been on their website and read about it, and they share the story of raising more than $244 million. And essentially it was a building campaign, but their vision, their magic in the case for support, which you can read online, I've included the link at the bottom of this page. If their case for support could be boiled down into one sentence, it's providing more art for more people. And that's how they're changing and saving lives. There's a video that's available on their site, and it's a very short video that gives an animation overview of the vision that they had and are bringing to life. Hmm. Well, I suspect you feel like I do. I mean, it's such an inspiring vision. And I envision how many first dates will happen in that space, and how many wedding proposals, and how many school field trips will walk those halls and stand in awe of the amazing art that's on display. So there's the aerial shot, which I also thought was just stunning and captivating. And so I have a question for you. What magical vision will you create to save and change lives in your community? And you can go ahead and drop that in the chat. I mean, you joined this session on capital campaigns because there is something magical. There's a dream that's beginning to bubble up inside your organizations, and you want to be ready for it. You want to be prepared to help lead that vision, that dream into fruition for your community. Now, some of you may have read the Guardian. Yesterday, there was an announcement by philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. She announced $2.7 billion that she's contributing to 286 small U.S. arts organizations, which was just extraordinary. And she said, quote, she did it to empower voices that need to be heard. And I thought, what perfect timing. I mean, I think about you and your work and the arts all across Australia. Your voices need to be heard. Your art needs to be seen and felt and experienced. And that's really what capital fundraising is all about. So let's kind of dig into how we do this and how we ensure your capital campaign success. And quite frankly, the vast majority of your success factors live in the planning of your campaign. So we're going to go into all 7 steps, the first being setting your fundraising goals for capital and establishing your case for support. We're going to look at your campaign budget, what should be in it, and what will you need to create as a post-campaign pro forma budget. And what does that mean? We'll talk about gift range charts and how you calculate them, as well as the associated naming opportunities that go with those top gifts and second gifts and so on. We will talk about how you can find campaign supporters. Where will these donors come from? And then how do you conduct a feasibility study? And what are the benefits of doing so? And then how do you recruit and empower and train a volunteer committee to actually lead your capital campaign? And then, of course, then how do you refine and launch each phase of your campaign, the silent phase, the major gift phase, and then finally going public. So let's dig in with the goal setting. So the first step is to define your capital campaign fundraising goals and your case for support. Now, there are three different ways that you can craft this campaign, right? So you could set goals around bricks and mortar, which is what we saw in some of those examples. New buildings, or breathing new life, or perhaps expanding into existing spaces, like renovations. You could be doing a capacity building capital campaign. And this is an emerging trend over the last few years. Folks are fine with the bricks and mortar that they have, but they have a bigger vision, a special project, a big, hairy, audacious goal, if you're a Jim Collins Good to Great fan. And they need that to come to life, and it has nothing to do with buildings. So it could be that you're going to purchase a permanent exhibit and bring it to your art center. It could be that you want to double the number of dancers. It could be that you want to take art on the road to the communities outside of your traditional geographic footprint. But you've got some vision that doesn't have to do with buildings, but it does have to do with growing, scaling, reaching more people. In the case we heard earlier, bringing more art to more people, whatever your art expression is. And then there are also endowment campaigns. Now, that could be to just grow the corpus with the intention of increasing investment revenue or income, or increasing the amount of interest income, depending on your board policy. But here's what I'll say. Traditionally, endowment campaigns do much better when they are mirrored as an add-on to a bricks and mortar campaign or to a capacity building campaign. Typically, if you're doing an endowment campaign and that is the sole purpose of the campaign, they typically don't perform as well. So just a word of caution, if you're seeking to grow endowment, I would do it at a time where you are doing a bricks and mortar campaign or a capacity building campaign. Now, in terms of a general rule of thumb or a general guideline about how much you could potentially raise in capital, typically an organization can raise 5 to 10 times the amount of their annual fundraising. So if you're raising $1 million, just for the sake of easy math, if you're raising $1 million a year in charitable contributions, you could likely raise $5 to $10 million. Now, we're going to get into more details. That's like the 50,000 foot view of estimating what you could raise, but we really need to dig into your data and your donor base. Okay, so we talked about setting the campaign goal. Now we want to look at the case for support. And the case for support is never, we need money. The case for support is never, we need a new building. The case for support is, this new building will allow us to do X, right? It's always about the impact on the community. As Gerald Panis would say, how you're saving lives or changing lives. So your case for support has to convey what the campaign will accomplish and why does it matter. What are the driving forces behind the campaign, right? Why now? What's the sense of urgency? What are the pressing issues that this campaign will help solve in our community? Why are you the organization to take on this issue, right? Is it your theory of change? Is it the unique network or the membership power that you have? What is it about you that has you bringing this solution to this community problem? And why now, right? Especially as we are hopefully emerging from this pandemic where there's been so many basic needs challenges and unemployment or underemployment challenges with health and wellness all around the world. Why the arts? Why the arts? And so I want to share this quote, and this came again yesterday from Mackenzie Scott, and she said that arts and culture organizations can strengthen communities by transforming spaces, fostering empathy, reflecting community identity, advancing economic mobility, improving academic outcomes, lowering crime rates, and improving mental health. So we evaluated smaller arts organizations and audiences from culturally rich regions and identity groups that donors often overlook. And that's how they determined those 286 arts organizations that are sharing $2.73 billion as of yesterday. And I want you to own that. Like she sees it as a billionaire philanthropist, that you're so much more than entertainment, right? That's not who you are at all. Although your art is incredible, the dance, the theater, it is entertainment. It's a joy. But it also fosters empathy. It gives people a place to belong. It transforms spaces. It does all of these things that have an impact on the community and the quality of life. I mean, even just aside from the emotional and moral imperative of making certain that our communities have a rich culture of arts, there are so many economic benefits to communities. They can attract employers, they attract employees, there's just reduced crime rates. Like there's a financial return on investment. And here's what I know after 20 years of fundraising and raising more than $500 million, either directly or through groups that I've trained and coached. And you've probably seen this yourselves in your communities. And that is that people are basically emotional donors looking for rational reasons to justify what their heart is calling them to do. And so when we can make a case for support like this for the arts, that you are just as important as feeding families in a different way, but equally important, then we will raise the bar on fundraising in the arts. All right, I totally got on a soapbox. I can't help myself. All right, let's move on to the second of 7 steps to ensure your campaign success. So, and that is creating a campaign budget and timeline. Now, the average campaign typically takes between 2 and 4 years. And so you want to have a budget for that period of time. Here's an example of a 3-year campaign budget. So you can see the years on the top row going across, and then you can see the primary categories of expenses that you need to plan for if you're going to take on a campaign of whether it's bricks and mortar or capacity building. So first of all, campaign staffing. You likely will need to add staff. If not a major gift officer, or maybe if you're the director of development or the chief philanthropy officer, maybe you'll need to bring on an events manager or someone to offload something that you're doing to free you up to be the campaign manager, or at the very least, provide you some additional administrative support. So that'll need to be evaluated and budgeted for both the salary and the benefits. Then you will likely bring on some consultants, and you'll need to plan that over the course of the campaign, those fees. Now, typically, when you engage campaign counsel, there's more fees up front because, as I said, the planning is so intense. And as you get further and further through the campaign and closer to the public phase, you need less and less campaign counsel. So it's front loaded. And my suggestion is that you budget and seek feasibility study counsel separate from campaign execution counsel. And here's why. I know that, most of us who are in the consulting field kind of grew up inside nonprofits. We have good hearts, we're honest people. But the truth is, if you package those together as a consultant, it can create a conflict of interest. I'll have more interest in the feasibility study saying that you should run a campaign if I'm already contracted to execute that campaign. So better to have those as 2 completely separate activities, even though you may very well hire the same firm. Okay, so you'll make changes to the website to have a special landing page. Once you get to the public phase, there'll be fees associated with that, and that'll be more in, year 3, very likely. There may be office space or mailings, or if you're adding staff, there could be additional desks that you're setting up. So just think about office expenses and operations that could increase over the course of this campaign. And then campaign systems, whether that's you're going to be subscribing to some wealth screening tools online, or you'll need additional computer equipment, those kinds of things. You want to be really intentional and forward facing and budget for these expenses so that they're not surprises. And then lastly, we want to know that and plan for campaign events, whether those are private events held for some of your higher end donors, whether they are coffee and donuts that you're serving up for your volunteer campaign cabinet leadership groups. But there will be expenses, some of them small, but you'll replicate those over time, and they can add up. And then of course you'll have cultivation and solicitation meetings, and we'll be throwing a campaign celebration when we complete the public phase of the campaign, and you'll want a budget for that as well. Then there's recognition, right? Naming on buildings, plaques on conference rooms, luncheons, regional events, whatever it is that you're planning, you want to budget for it. And then of course, kind of factor in a 5 to 10% wiggle room. Things you didn't think of, things that you thought would cost X, and 3 years later they cost a bit more. So I want you to have a campaign budget, and it needs to be for the duration of the campaign. And then we need to look at a pro forma budget. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with what a pro forma budget is. You likely are. But essentially, there will be some very business smart, savvy donors who are contributing to you. And they will ask the question, all right, at the end of this campaign, when you have your amazing new building, or you have expanded into this new vision through this capacity building campaign, how will you keep the lights on? Right? The electric bill will be higher. Your property taxes will be, you pay property taxes in Australia? If the answer is no, I'm moving right away. So the point is, there will be additional expenses once you have this new, bigger vision that has come to life. So a pro forma budget is how you would expect your day-to-day expenses to increase, whether they're operational or expanded program expenses. If you're adding staff as a part of this service expansion, there'll be additional salaries and benefits. The bottom line is you'll have more expenses. So how will you generate more revenue to offset those expenses? Because if they've invested 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure gifts with you, they want to make certain that you are here for the long run, and they will want to see a pro forma budget, and they'll be incredibly impressed that you have one. All right, step number 3 of 7, develop a gift range chart and preliminary naming opportunities. Now, this gift range chart is a working chart. It's something that you will test through the feasibility study, and then based on the feedback that the consultant gets, the gift range chart might be tweaked or updated or refined, or maybe you're spot on. But here are some general guidelines when you go about creating your gift range chart. The first thing is, a few years ago, we pretty much lived by the 80-20 rule. And this is likely was true in your organizations as well. 80% of the charitable contributions came from 20% of the donors. But I would say that since 2000 and, well, here in the US, 2010, 2012, when we had our real economic dip, it really went to more of the 90-10 rule. 90% of the contributions were coming from 10% of the donors. Those high net worth individuals who wanted to make certain that we made it through the recession. The largest gift on your gift chart to your campaign will ideally be 15 to 20% of the campaign goal. If it's more than that, great. But 15 to 20% from that of the campaign goal for that top gift is one of the ways you're going to ensure a higher likelihood of success. Half the campaign goal would ideally be secured from about 15, 10, 12, 15 donors, and 65 to 75% will ideally be secured from 100 donors or less. That's what I'm talking about in the 90-10 rule, right? Fewer donors making larger gifts. Now, it is important that you engage your broader community in the campaign's public phase. So let's say, and I had this happen with a example that I'm going to share with you. It was actually a Meals on Wheels in Tampa, Florida. And for this Meals on Wheels, we did a $5 million campaign to build a new building that helped them go from serving, I think it was serving 850 meals a day to homebound seniors and people who had medical conditions, to serving more than 3,000 meals a day. Like, that was their big vision. So it was capacity building and capital combined. And it was so successful that by the time they got through the silent phase of the campaign and the major gift size of the campaign, there really wasn't, they were almost at goal. They really didn't need to do a community phase of the campaign, a public phase. But it was important that they did. And here's why. If the community doesn't have an opportunity to contribute to your capital campaign, whether it's through $20 direct mail response or online gifts or peer-to-peer contribution through a Facebook ad or challenge, if those little elementary school kids don't have a chance to fill the penny jars and contribute, they don't see your organization as their organization. And that means that they won't necessarily continue giving or give at all once the campaign is done. You will actually cannibalize, in a way, your annual fund by not including the community in your capital campaign. Does that make sense? And a lot of people will say, well, gosh, I'm really worried that our capital campaign will make our annual fund go down. And this, involving the community in the campaign's public phase, is one of the ways that you can make certain that people keep giving to annual fund afterwards. So it's a little bit counter-logical, but I've seen it over and over and over again. And then as you look at how many prospective donors you need to look at or cultivate and engage and identify for every realized gift, the general rule of thumb is 3 to 1. It can be a little less. It could be 2 to 1 at the very top levels of that gift chart, and maybe 4 to 1 in the community phase of the campaign, but generally a 3 to 1. And you're going to see that in the example gift range chart that I've prepared for you. So here it is. So this is a sample gift range chart for a $2.5 million campaign. So you can see this left-hand column. These are the number of gifts we actually need to get. And this is the amount of each of those gifts. So just follow me here. So I need to secure one gift at $500,000. And so what's the total from that level? Like, you know, 500,000 times 1 is 500,000. So cumulatively to the campaign, we raised 500,000. We're at 20% of goal. To get that one gift, to secure that donor, I need to have 2 people that I'm cultivating that could give at that level. They have the capacity to give at that level. They are charitable, so they have the propensity to give, and they care about our cause. So I need 2 prospects to get that one gift. We go down to the next gift level. I need 2 gifts at $250,000. Which is $500,000 for that level. If I can secure those, I'm already at $1 million, which is 40% of goal. The 2 to 1 ratio means I need 4 prospects that I have identified and I'm cultivating and engaging to get those gifts, right? So to realize 2, I need to be engaging 4, and so on. But you can see that the multiplier effect is 2 at this level, 3 at these levels, and 4 at this lower level. And inch by inch, we get to our numbers. And again, this would be a gift chart, a portion of this. I would collapse some of it, but I would show the number of gifts and the gift values as a working model. I would test that in the feasibility study. I would share that with someone who has bought into the vision, who's excited, and I would ask them, could you see yourself participating and contributing and being part of this campaign? And if the response is positive, I might show this chart, a version of this chart, abbreviated, and say, well, could you see yourself in one of these ranges? And that's how we test it and assess if this needs to be tweaked or if this is spot on. All right. So as we're developing the gift range chart and those preliminary naming opportunities, of course, we're assessing who are the people that should be those prospects to secure those realized gifts. And we're looking at 3 things. Capacity to give. Do they have the financial wealth and the disposable income that they could make an investment in our campaign? Do they have a propensity to give? There are a lot of high net worth people who aren't that charitable. So is this person charitable? Do they have a propensity to give? So capacity, yes. Propensity, yes. We're on a roll. Do they care about our cause? We want a yes here. Otherwise, you're just kind of chasing the wealthy strangers who want to cure a disease, right? They don't care about the arts. They may care about something else. We need the people that we're identifying for our gift chart to possess all 3 of these attributes: capacity, propensity, and interest in our cause. I know that makes common sense, but it's not always, common practice, because we do think, I'm going to we just need to get a hold of the wealthiest person in our community. We don't really know anything about them, whether they're charitable or not, or whether they care about the arts. And it's just a waste of time and energy. All right, and so then the part B of step 3 is to align naming opportunities with that gift range chart. You also want to look at your gift acceptance and recognition policies to see if they need updated prior to launching this campaign. So, what if someone wants, they commit $500,000 and they want to pay in cryptocurrency or Bitcoin? Like, are you prepared for that? Is that okay for your organization? What if they want to donate land or a piece of art? Like, who gets that appraised? Who incurs the expense for that? You also want to take a look at the duration of the named recognition. I see this as a really common problem. We're so excited to get the $1 million or that $500,000 and to put someone's name on the conference room or the building. And then 10 years later, when it's time for the next campaign or a renovation of that space, we want to use that recognition as an incentive for a new gift. But does that leave the prior donor upset or their family? I literally had a situation when I was Chief Philanthropy Officer at the Children's Center here in Detroit, and we had a huge parking issue. As Detroit has kind of come back economically and culturally, parking has become a huge issue. And we had a building that wasn't American Disabilities Act compliant, didn't have an elevator. We had to level the building. And one of our mature donors who doesn't drive anymore, he had a family member drive by and they're like, the building that had your name doesn't exist anymore. And so, thankfully we had saved the plaque. And I was able to quickly get that repurposed on another building and take pictures and make a nice visit to his home. But here's the point, you have to think ahead. So make certain that your systems, your policies, and your standard gift agreement, does Does it speak to the duration of recognition? And then, of course, while you're looking at this, it makes perfect sense to at least get some estimates on what recognition will cost so that you can put that information in your budget. All right, you with me so far? All right, 3 of 7. Here's an example. This is the campaign brochure for the Meals on Wheels capital campaign that we did in Tampa. You can see the rendering that we had created for this brochure, and then this campaign naming opportunities was an insert. So it was right inside the front cover in a pocket or a flap. So we had a schematic of the building and we identified all the naming opportunities. So you could see the building overall to get your name on it was $1 million. The kitchen was $750,000. And then there were 3 $500,000 opportunities. You could name the campus, the conference room, or the lobby. Now, here's what's kind of interesting, and we think creatively. The loading dock. To get your name on the loading dock was $150,000, which doesn't sound very sexy, right? Oh, the loading dock. Great. But the truth is, when you look at where this building is located, the loading dock is right on one of the busiest streets. So any corporate partner that wants to really increase their visibility and their leadership in the community would have jumped at that bargain price of $150,000. So I show this so you can think about your naming opportunities and how you might present them and how you want to map these naming opportunities and the gift values back to your gift range chart. I see you smiling, so it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I just couldn't help but put in there's the rendering of the building and there's the actual building. And I can tell you there's no joy like seeing something, a dream that was a drawing, and all the hard work and all the passion that goes into a capital campaign to see it come to life. And next Wednesday, I'm actually flying to Tampa and I will get the walkthrough of the building. So I'm so excited. And I want this for you. I want each of you to see that magic, that magical idea. You know what? It's 10:08 here. Forgive me. To have that magical idea, that dream and that vision come to life. I want that for you. All right. Step number 4, we need supporters. We need to find donors for this campaign. So where do we look? The first place we look is in our database, right? People who have been giving to you, who've been loyal, who already have a passion for the mission. So here are some different slice and dice ways to look at the data to identify who are those potentially hidden gems that could really rise to the top and be leaders in your campaign. So first, we want to look at all the donors who have given in the last 3 years and sort that largest to smallest gifts and see who pops up. We want to also take a look at lifetime cumulative giving. You know, some people have been giving modestly to you, but they've been giving for decades. So there's something there. Even if they're not in a position to give a large lump sum, but they might be. They could be the millionaire next door that lives so modestly. But even if they can't make a big gift during their lifetime, they might be able to leave you in their legacy plans. I mean, just good things come from looking at cumulative lifetime giving. Look at people who gave to the last major gift campaign or the last capital campaign, even if it was 10 or 15 years ago, or they were a founder. Look at corporate supporters who might be interested in, raising their community profile or showcasing their leadership in your community. Maybe they're new there's some corporate supporters that might be new to your community. Look at foundation partners who have a history of investing in capital or capacity building projects. And then, of course, do the wealth screening, do your research, and equally important to the data research that we do is to sit down with your capital campaign leadership committee and your board or key board members and have conversations about this shortened prospect list that you've identified. Show them that gift range chart. And again, it's all marked draft, working copy, but get feedback about who should be involved, who would want to be involved, and who would be heartbroken if you didn't invite them to be involved in this really milestone campaign. And then also determine, okay, I've got this list of 44 prospects who could give at those top levels. Who has the best relationship with them? Who should be a part of that engagement team? Oh, there's my Western Edge Youth Arts people. You were there last time. Good to see you again. And then, of course, rate those prospective supporters to determine the best strategy to move forward. So we were just talking about current supporters. Now, we also want to look for new supporters. So who does have the capacity, propensity, and the inclination? They are interested in the arts, in your organization. Maybe they're giving to other arts organizations in the community, and they might be interested in this milestone campaign with you as well. Brainstorm additional supporters, ask your campaign leadership committee and your board members to think about others who perhaps haven't been supporters yet, but a vision, a campaign, the magical vision of this project would capture their attention. There are a lot of philanthropists. We talked about this in the Story Living when we look at major donor personas. There are many, they're called communitarians or do-gooders, and they're typically entrepreneurs. And they don't want to kind of piddle around with making small gifts. And for them, small could be 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. They want big, juicy projects that have a huge impact. And your campaign is an opportunity to capture their attention and their imagination and their hearts. So talk with board members, your campaign leadership committee, do your own research, right? What other causes is this particular person supporting? Is there a strong tie between that cause and our cause? Who has a great relationship? Who would be willing, when the time is right, to set up a meeting or make an introduction? And then conduct prospect rating with the committee to determine the best strategy for moving forward. So prospect rating, what's that? So that's where we take our gift range chart. You can see that in the left-hand table here. And we rank ability by gift level. So if I'm a 1, I have the capacity to make a $500,000 gift. If I'm a 5, I have the capacity to make a gift somewhere between $25,000 and just under $50,000. Now that's based on prospect research wealth screening data. It's also based on what you've seen on the internet or heard in the community or read in the newspaper about what other projects they've given to. So down here at the bottom, we list their names under prospect. We look at their ability to give based on our research, and we rank what would be their gift value from the table above. And then their inclination. Are they charitable on a scale from A, B, and C, high, medium, and low? And then what's their connection or interest to our mission? Is it strong, a 3? Yeah, somewhat, a 2. Or we don't know. They're brand new to us. We don't know yet. We'll have to talk with them or make some connections or talk with more people to know. That's how you do a rating and screening. All right, step number 5 of 7, conduct a feasibility study. So a feasibility study is a way that you test your plan, your case for support, your goals, by asking the advice of usually somewhere between 50 to 75 of your largest donors, but also community leaders, influencers. And so the feasibility study itself is an investment. So you're going to typically outsource that to an experienced consultant, because sometimes your donors won't tell you the truth because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to disappoint you. And so they'll kind of be a little vague. Whereas as a consultant, they tell me things you wouldn't believe. Right? Like there's no downside to telling me exactly how they feel because it's a confidential conversation. But based on that feedback, any good consultant is going to give you guidance without compromising the confidentiality that they committed to the donor. So you'll get really good input on your case for support, on your gift range chart, on the dollar value that you think you can raise. The feasibility study will really provide great feedback. Now, because we're scheduling 50 to 75 interviews with typically really successful, super busy people, it can take 2 to 4 months to complete that feasibility study. But I believe it's time well spent. All right, step number 6, we want to identify, recruit, and train up a campaign leadership committee, right? We want the movers and shakers who are passionate about our organization leading this campaign. The truth is, as leaders in the community, as volunteers, as donors themselves, they can open up doors and start conversations that we as staff simply can't access or can rarely access. So it's imperative that you get the right volunteer leadership around the table. I suggest 8 to 10 people, right? If you get plus whatever staff you're adding, so 8 to 10 volunteers, and mostly because scheduling can be a nightmare, right? Imagine 8 to 10 high-powered executives or business people. Their calendars are full. They travel quite a bit. So we want to make it something that we can manage. 8 to 10 people. They need to have a demonstrated commitment to your organization. So that means they've been a donor, perhaps they were a former board member, they're a patron. They actually have a connection. These are not the wealthy strangers. These are kind of people who are in the family. And I mentioned they need to be credible, like really well respected. They need to have influence and power and be willing to use that influence and power to open doors and make introductions and to really advocate on your behalf and to engage and cultivate and ultimately, if not ask, at least accompany someone, maybe staff, maybe some peer, maybe someone from the board or maybe someone else on the committee to at least accompany someone else who's making an ask. We need them to make a gift that is personally significant to them, preferably at that leadership level giving. So those higher 4 or 5 tier, the highest gifts on the gift range chart. Active participation in the campaign planning and execution. This is not, I'll lend my name. This is, I'll lend my name, my influence, my time, my money. I will roll up my sleeves and we will get across the finish line together. And they commit for the full duration of the campaign, right? So we need to be super organized and set those expectations in the recruitment process. Not like, welcome to the committee, here's what we need you to do. It should be no surprise. So there are other considerations, of course. We want to make certain that our campaign leadership committee has diversity, men, women, racial, ethnic diversity. We want to have, I mentioned men and women, but also non-binary. Like we want to be as inclusive as possible. We want to have representation from the different communities in which you serve. We want current board members and past board members. But here's the thing. I don't like to see more than half of those volunteers be board or past board. Half of them can be, but I also want other people in the community who are influential serving on this committee. So to be organized, to be also credible with them, we need to have written campaign chair and campaign committee member written job descriptions, not jobs, but accountabilities. We want to have, once that committee is finalized, a roster, email distribution list, call chain lists, an agreed upon meeting schedule and location. We want to train them up, as well as our board, in talking points about this campaign, equip them in the major donor development cycle. A lot of them have been asking, and they've been charitable, and they've been involved in other campaigns, so they're pretty savvy, but we want to make certain that they're aligned with the approach that we're taking. So we need to equip and empower this group to perform at the maximum within the confines of the amount of time that they've agreed to give to us. All right. The 7th step in our 7 steps is to look at our campaign, right? We had a rough working campaign, strategy, plan, timeline. We now have the feedback from the feasibility study. We've got feedback, initial feedback from our campaign cabinet members and chair. And so notice again this whole timeline. Remember how I said a lot of the success in your campaign relies upon the upfront work that you do, the really intentional and thorough planning that you perform to the highest levels of excellence. So you've got 3 to 12 months just in the pre-campaign planning before you even do the feasibility study, most of the time. Feasibility study, as I mentioned, is 2 to 4 months. Campaign planning, incorporating the feedback from the feasibility study is a couple of months typically. Here you're getting some of the renderings and the schematics and the architects' budget and drawings and all of that. If it's a bricks and mortar campaign, if it's a building capacity campaign, you're doing the due diligence in whatever service enhancements you're planning to do. What I want to talk about next is the 3 phases of your campaign: the silent phase, the major gift phase, and then the public phase. And you can see the timelines here. So here's our gift range chart. The first 4 levels, the ones that are highlighted here, that's our silent phase. That takes 6 to 12 months typically. And our goal is to raise 50 to 75% of the campaign goal in the silent phase. We also want to do the board giving campaign. And I know board members, sometimes we even have beneficiaries of our programs, people who maybe don't have a high net worth, but 100% board giving at a gift level that's significant to them is really key to this campaign. Also, your campaign leadership committee, each of them should make their commitment during the silent phase. So that's 6 to 12 months. And we've got essentially, 15 donors, 44 prospects that we are bringing through this process to get to 1.8 million or 72% of goal in 6 to 12 months in this $2.5 million example. So take that list of those 44 donors, right? These prospects that we need, those 44 people who might qualify to make a gift in one of those top 4 giving levels, and then go through your database, use your prospect research tools, talk to your campaign cabinet about what they know about those particular donor prospects and their giving potential, and really begin saying, do these 44 people, are these the 44 that can live in this silent phase? Or do a few of them need to get bumped down to the major gift phase? Really true it up. So then we look at that major gift phase, which is the next 12 to 24 months. You definitely want to do these sequentially. Silent phase first, move into major gifts. So here, we've got the number of gifts that we need. So 45 gifts that we need to realize at these gift levels. And so, 130, we need 135 prospects. That's why it takes 12 to 24 months. That's a lot of prospects to engage, even with the broader campaign cabinet committee working side by side with you. So again, we're just vetting through those in that phase, and we're making certain during this refining and launching your campaign solicitation strategy, we're making certain that we've got the right 135 prospects that really do have the capacity to give at these levels, the propensity to be charitable, and the interest, the passion for our cause in such a way that they would make such a generous investment. And then we are celebrating, right? So we've gotten through the silent phase, we've gotten through the major gift phase. We're at 2.3 million, 92% of our $2.5 million campaign, and now we go public. Now we hold the press conference. Now we send out the press release. Now we start the public campaign. We need 30 people to give $2,500, which will get us to 95%. And then we need the gifts that are under 2,500, lots and lots of those. And again, this is, elementary school, penny jars, it's peer-to-peer, it's multi-channel. And this is an important phase to get community buy-in, so they will continue to support your annual fund well after this campaign is complete. All right, so just as here's the bullets of what we just talked about. So align those prospective supporters to make certain they fit those gift categories based on those ratings. Assign a relationship manager or a relationship team for those leadership gifts during the silent phase and the major gifts during the next phase. You want to have the right team engaging, cultivating, and eventually soliciting those individuals or those individuals within a corporation for the corporate donors or supporters, right? So the people that they would be so delighted and so honored that they wanted to meet with them, that they asked them to join them in supporting this important endeavor to save lives and change lives and enhance the community, more art for more people. Then we create a donor development plan and timeline with a specific ask amount for every one of those donors. And then we make the asks. And then we track the results, we report them to the committee, to the board, we stay in communication at those top levels. And then, as I said, we plan for the public event, campaign, events, multi-channel, peer-to-peer. Again, I love Jerry Panis, so another quote, asking for a gift shouldn't set your knees trembling. It isn't razzle-dazzle or persuading people to do something they don't want to do. This is about the joy of giving. It's about inviting someone to invest in a dream, to be part of the magic of bringing an idea to life that changes communities, that changes lives. I like to think that people who have given to capital campaigns that I have run or managed as a consultant or inside as staff, as the campaign director, I like to think that they look back on their life as they mature and they think that that was one of the most meaningful volunteer activities they ever did, or one of the most meaningful gifts they ever gave. They feel that joy and that love and that pride in having been a part of it. And that's what you want to create for your donors as well. And so often, when we talk with volunteers, potential volunteers about serving on a campaign cabinet or being our partner or having screening discussions or rating discussions, they shy away. They think that campaigns are about asking. I'm uncomfortable asking. I'm afraid of quid pro quo, right? If I ask someone to make a 5 or 6 figure gift, they will eventually ask me to make a 5 or 6 digit gift. And I'm just not comfortable in all that asking. But the truth is, when done well, when done as it's designed to be done, this is relationship building. It's not asking. So if you look at the donor-centric major gift development cycle, 20%, the first step is this 20% discovery. It's all that due diligence and the research about what this donor or prospective donor cares about and what they give to and what's their capacity and what would be the thing that we would ask them to give to that would set their heart on fire. Then the next 35% is cultivation, relationship building, connecting them to the vision, engaging them in meaningful ways. We do eventually ask them for money. And then we talk about how we'd like to recognize their generosity in ways that are appropriate to the gift value. But those two things, solicitation and recognition, are only 10% of the process. Then we move on to stewardship at 35%. The point I want to make here is that between cultivation and stewardship, which is relationship building and reporting back how their gifts are changing lives, the impact in measurable and meaningful ways of their gift, that's 70%. So this really is major gift development is relationship development with a, cherry on top ask. And again, Jerry Panis, he says that when you get the visit, you're 85% on your way to getting the gift. And let me tell you, do you know how you get the visit? You get the visit by doing the cultivation and discovery well, because you're inviting them to participate in something that they're really intrigued by. They're curious, and then curiosity turns into interest, and interest turns into passion. And eventually they're saying, how can I help? What do you want? And you know you've done cultivation well when they say that. All right. Are you ready for a campaign? How many of you raise your hands like you think you're ready for a campaign? Maybe. Well, I don't know. It's a little makes me nervous. My Western Edge Youth Arts, they're ready. They're brimming. Can't hold them back. All right, so here are some questions. Here are some questions to ask yourself. And if you want to say yes to all of these, you're ready. If you say yes to most of them, it just means you've got a little more work to do to be ready. It doesn't mean that you can't get there. All right, so here are the questions. Is there agreement among board and staff about the worthiness of this campaign? Is everybody on board? Is everyone committed to the success of it? Like, yeah, it's worthy, but do they believe you can do it? Is your organization well regarded, respected in the community, especially in the communities in which you'll be asking for money? Are your services considered important and relevant? Again, going back to your case for support. Why should I support you? What difference do you make? What's the impact? Why should I care? What's the sense of urgency? Is top-level leadership available or willing to make themselves available? And are they interested in the project? Can your largest gift be 15 to 20% of the campaign goal? Can a sufficient group of influential, credible, powerful volunteers be recruited and enlisted and trained to work on this campaign? You only need 8 to 10 of them. Is the timing and planning of the campaign sound? Is this the right time? And will you have enough resources to support annual operations after the campaign? So that goes back to that pro forma budget. All right, so let's talk about the top 10 do's and don'ts of campaigns. And then Megan, I think we'll be ready to take some Q's and A's. So number one mistake. People set the campaign goal, the monetary goal, based on the project costs. That's the equivalent of me saying, I really want a Ferrari. Let me go get a loan for a Ferrari, and thinking that that's going to fit in my family budget, right? You actually have to have like a campaign monetary goal that is supported by the due diligence that you've done with your gift ratings, your gift range chart, all of that work. Don't skip the feasibility study. That is an invaluable step in making certain that you have tested the case, that the community feels strongly about the case, the community that you've interviewed, and that you have the will and the financial consideration from those major donors to make this a success. Do give your campaign enough time to succeed, but not go on forever, right? So my very first development position, they had just finished a capital campaign, like maybe 2 years prior. It was a Girl Scout council, and the campaign was for camp. Beautiful new cabins, a yurt, like they had done a lot of work out at the camp. And the main donor, the donor who had given the lead gift, we just couldn't get across the finish line. It had been 2 years, and there was still like $200,000 hanging out there that just couldn't get closed. And so I met him for the first time, was introducing myself, getting to know him, and we talked about that campaign. And he said, "What's the number? Like, how did you ever cross the finish line on that campaign?" And I said, "No, from what I understand, there's still $200,000 out there, a gap." He's like, "Let me write a check and put it out of its misery." Right? And then he went on to say, "And our family can't be the only ones supporting this organization." Like there was, him and his family, and then that vast wasteland between the next highest donor. And so that was a really good conversation. But the point being, you don't want these campaigns to go on forever and to like weigh everyone's like emotional energy down. He was exhausted by the campaign, and he had been the chair. So don't let it go on forever. Number 4, don't go public too soon, meaning before you achieve 65 or 75% of the goal. I have a story. I was working with a domestic violence shelter in Alaska, and they flew me out to do a 2-day major gift workshop to train their board and their fundraising committee in major gift fundraising strategy and the actual tactics, how to do major gift work. And they were getting ready to launch a campaign, and they had hired a marketing firm to help them put together the materials. So when I got in, they were planning, like it was, believe it or not, I went to Alaska in like February. Oh my gosh, it was so cold. There was so much snow. And they were planning to do the public kickoff like in April. I'm like, whoa, we haven't even raised $1. You like, time out. This is how this works. So the point is, you want to make certain that your success is nothing more than nudging the inevitable by the time you go public. Otherwise, people will be disillusioned. They'll think, oh my gosh, we're playing this campaign and you have only raised 500,000 of 5 million. My modest gift certainly won't make a difference. Like, I'm not interested. And by the time people join your campaign cabinet and you go public, they want to have that sense of pride, and for everyone to know, like, this is going to be a success. I've associated myself with a campaign that's already successful by the time word is on the street and it's gone public. Don't underestimate the importance of stakeholder engagement in the upfront campaign planning. That's why we test the case in the feasibility study and have draft written all over it, because people help support what they feel they've helped to create or build. And so it's important that those prospective donors have an opportunity to have their voice heard, to have their ideas incorporated where appropriate, and that will only make it more likely that they'll support the campaign financially and help introduce you to others. Number 6, don't hire the nice person who knows everyone in town as your campaign director in lieu of someone with fundraising experience, right? There are technical components of this. There are policy, like, you want to make certain this is done with excellence. So you want a nice person who knows people and they are expert fundraisers, right? Not just the friendly glad hander. Don't think you can meet your campaign goal with uniform gifts. How many times have you heard some well-meaning person say, we need to raise $2 million. Can't we just ask like 1,000 people for $2,000? Right? That would be easy. Where that does it has some people like, there's no way I could give $2,000, so they feel left out or excluded. The other risk is people who can make a significant gift, who can really want to have a big impact. $2,000 just feels like pocket change. They don't feel that sense of ownership. So uniform gifts never work. Trust me. Do invest in additional staff to manage the increased volume of work. It will pay off in a return on investment. So even those of you who are thinking, oh my gosh, we can't add staff, we're so constrained, even if it's a part-time administrative person to start to lend a hand, you'll want some staff because there's so many moving pieces, and you're still doing the annual fund event and year-end campaign and all, your day job. Don't increase or decrease the campaign goal once it's been announced. It just undermines your credibility. So that's, again, a really important reason to have a working goal during the silent phase and the major gift phase. Once it goes public, you're locked in. And please don't let a scarcity mindset take a hold of you or your campaign leadership committee. You can do this. And the planning that you do up front will give you the confidence that this is possible, All right. Very good. Megan? Oh, man. I'm 3 minutes ahead.
Tammy, thank you. That was fantastic. It is so valuable having you share all that extensive experience with us. So we so appreciate that. And you've just perfectly articulated that mix, inherent in capital campaigns of the big picture thinking, the dream, the vision, the magic, as you reference, along with all that critical, detailed, step-by-step process and the foundations that we need in place. There's so many useful takeaways, I think, regardless of where we are in our campaign journeys with our own organizations, and particularly for those who've got significant projects in the pipeline and are starting out. So we've got good time for questions now, and I've seen some pop up on the chat. The first one that came up, Tammy, was from Monique, and it was around feasibility studies, about whether you can share a sample cost range for a feasibility study.
The cost range is somewhat dependent on the size and scope of the campaign, and certainly how many interviews you'll be conducting. But I would say that a cost range in the US dollars, for a campaign, say with 50 to 75 interviews, is going to be somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000. So it's not just the interviews. For the feasibility study, they are working with you to refine the case for support, to refine the gift range chart that you're going to test, and then to gather all of that, the responses from the interviewees. Now, typically, there's a staff member who is helping make those appointments for the consultant, like we've given blocks of time, but that's all flexible, and that impacts like where you are in the range. If I need to make all of those appointments and schedule them, it's probably going to be, a little more costly than if you're scheduling all the appointments. Does that help?
Thank you. And
Monique,
also related to costs, there's one from Melody who says, what if you don't have the funds to commission a feasibility study or hire a consultant? Have you got ideas that will be free or cheaper alternatives for that aspect?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I would do is go to one of my visionary donors who would be inspired by the idea of this campaign. And I would ask them, I would put a preliminary case for support. I would take my CEO, whoever has a great relationship, and together we would talk about this dream. And the only thing keeping us from exploring the feasibility of it is $30,000. And I would ask them to pay for it.
Fantastic. And there's a question in from Stephen around some of the differences or around giving in Australia and America. And his question is, most donors in Australia might say, what is government giving to this? So that question of government responsibility and the intersection between philanthropy and government. When it comes to bricks and mortar campaigns, given the differences between North America and Oz, where we are lucky to have government funding, do you have any insights into the role of government funding for capital, or do you regard it simply as another donor? Where do they fit? Any advice if we don't have government on board?
Mm. Well, I'm not an expert in Australian philanthropy, especially related to capital. I have read in all of the case studies that government support, and I mean, Creative Partnerships Australia is a great example. Like, it's extraordinary the investment that government makes in nonprofit work in your communities all across the country. It's really extraordinary. So I would say that it naturally, because of that, is part of your culture. I think that it's only natural that individual or corporate donors would ask that question. What's the role of government? How much is the government giving to this? Have you approached them? What have you asked them for? What's their response so far? Have they committed? And I think even in the case studies that I read about Australian capital campaigns, leveraging government money as a match or as a challenge, or there were some of the case studies where the government also helped create pathways for the land to have access for purchasing land. So I think that that's an important piece. I'm not an expert. Megan, you might be able to answer that question from your view, but I think it's important. And what I read was that match gifts, leverage gifts, that was a key leverage point with the government, with other that we could showcase with donors related to government giving. I hope that made sense.
Absolutely, Tammy. Yeah, no, thank you. And it is, we do see that in our experience of and keeping that conversation around collaboration and what the responsibilities are, what the contribution is, and how it can be maximized by government and philanthropic partners. So really keeping that conversation positive has been an interesting aspect, within capital campaigns. There is a follow-on question to that from Brendan, who says, have you ever experienced contractual issues with naming rights when government money is involved in the project?
I have not. I have not had any naming issues related to the government. But I will say that in the US, government and capital don't frequently mix. So I'm not much help in that area.
No, and it's interesting that example you gave with Meals on Wheels, where you have such with the clarity there in the process, that as long as you've got a very distinct model and it's all, everyone understands where the naming rights sit, what the extent are, and what the details and parameters are. So that was really interesting in that schematic that you showed earlier. Another question that I've got is around return on investment for campaigns. Have you got an idea? Is there, are there studies that you're aware of, or in your experience, where you can talk to what the average return on investment might be, what we can see there?
I don't have anything related to, an average return on investment, because the organizations and their services, they're so very different. But I think that if you can identify specific outcomes, specific impact, like your arts organization, being able to expand your reach, the number of services, what is the impact for youth in terms of their academic improvement? And can we extrapolate that academic improvement to a higher percentage of them going on to university? Right, so there's a monetary trail that we can trace there. In terms of, you even heard it from Mackenzie Scott, like the mental health aspect of the arts and how that can lift one's spirit and add value. I mean, those are quantifiable kinds of values if you've got specific studies, but I don't know of an average return on investment.
Mm. And there's a follow on from Christina in the chat there who asks, just to clarify, how much should we expect to spend to raise 2.5 million? Is that something that it would vary considerably based on what you've said there?
It would. What I can tell you is that when you look at in the US, there's the average cost per dollar raised by different channels. So, for example, direct mail for current supporters, you spend typically a quarter to raise $1. Grants, you spend about 20 cents to raise $1. Events, you spend about 50 cents to raise $1. And so when it comes to major gift fundraising, it has the lowest cost per dollar raised. It's somewhere between 5 and 10 cents to raise $1 in major gifts. Now, those are all numbers that are unburdened by staff time. So it does not include, prorated number of hours at your at a salary or hourly rate. And that's actually, those are data points that were published by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. They produce that about every 2 years or so.
Fantastic. And now you'd referenced, donors being in the community. I'd love to hear more on that. How important is it that a donor is geographically near? They're in the community where the project is happening. Does that distinctly shift their engagement, or have you seen a whole range of experiences where donors might not be in that community, just have a particular connection or a history with that organization or with that project?
Mm-hmm. Well, giving is such a personal act. And so, from my view, it doesn't matter where they come from if they have an attachment or an affinity. Where it becomes important is when you are recruiting volunteers for your campaign leadership committee or campaign cabinet. If they are from far away, their participation could be limited, and their circle of influence in your primary region or community could be less, unless it's unless it's Mackenzie Scott or Oprah or any number of well-known Richard Branson, really high-profile philanthropists who could have an impact regardless of where they're located.
Fantastic. Thank you. And looking at the time, I think it is probably a good place to bring the webinar to a close. We will be circulating Tammy's details. So any other pressing questions that folks have got, feel free to be in touch once we've got all that through. And thank you so much for joining us through these sessions over the last few months. You'll shortly be receiving a request to complete a survey about today's webinar and, of course, any others in the series that you might have attended. We're in the process of planning the next lot, so we would so value your feedback and input in that. And just a final thank you, Tammy. That was a hugely engaging and informative session, and we really appreciate you staying up late. You'll probably, I imagine, be off to bed, whereas the rest of us have got the day ahead. So many thanks, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye, everyone.